Hello, everyone. My name is Khushboo Razdan, and I am a senior U.S. correspondent for the South China Morning Post in Washington, D.C. I will be your moderator for the next 1 hour of this educational program where we will discuss essential tools, skills, and knowledge that foreign correspondents can use to improve their reporting on this very critical issue of climate change. This program is hosted by the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents USA and the Julie Ann Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory at Arizona State University in Phoenix. For our discussion, we are joined by two esteemed experts on the subject, Dr. Peter Schlosser and Dr. Katharine Hayhoe. Welcome to the discussion. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll do a short introduction of our guests before we begin. So Dr. Schlosser is the Vice President, Vice Provost, and Professor at Julie Ann Wrigley Global Futures Laboratory at Arizona State University. He also holds joint appointments in the School of Sustainability, Ocean Futures, Earth and Space Exploration, and the School of Sustainable Engineering. Prior to joining the ASU in 2018, Dr. Schlosser spent 28 years at Columbia University, serving as a professor of geophysics, chair of Department of Earth Environmental Engineering, professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences, and the deputy director and director of research at the very prestigious Earth Institute. Dr. Schlosser's research focuses on hydrosphere, primarily the circulation of water in the oceans, continental surface water, and groundwater, including the impact of human activities. Dr. Schlosser, welcome, and thank you for joining us and sharing your expertise with us. And Dr. Katharine Hayhoe, she's an atmospheric scientist whose research focuses on understanding the impacts of climate change on people and the planet. She's the chief scientist at the Nature Conservancy and a Horn Distinguished Professor and Endowed Professor of Public Policy and Public Law at Texas Tech University. She also is the author of a best-selling book, Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World. She hosts a PBS digital series, Global Weirding, and is the co-founder of Science Moms, which is a nonpartisan group of climate scientists who are also moms working to demystify climate change and protect our kids' future. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure having you with us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us and over 100 guests that are joining us live today via Zoom. First, to set the foundation of the discussion, I would like to go to Dr. Schlosser, who has a presentation for us on the impact of climate change and how we can incorporate recent scientific findings to this important issue of climate change, and how our reporting we can incorporate scientific findings and what our scientific fraternity is doing. Dr. Schlosser, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Khushboo. I will share my screen, so let's see if that works. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, so what I would like to do is because we are talking about climate change in general, but also there is an extra attribute to it, the acceleration of climate change. So I will talk a bit about these topics and put them into the general context of a planet that we are living on that is under multiple pressures. So climate change is one of the major pressures, but not the only one. And the reason is, the question is, how did we get there? How did we get into a state of the world where we experience so much pressure? And where we, in essence, have entered the Anthropocene, which is a new era, new geological era that is characterized by human activity. And if we are looking around, we can feel the footprints of human activities everywhere from the outer atmosphere to the deep ocean. So we have actually managed to shape and engineer our planet on local to global scales since hundreds of years without really a strategic plan behind that. So it was more or less done stochastically. And that led to the fact that we actually did overstep some of the boundaries that our planet has naturally. We are overexploiting some of the life-supporting systems, which, looking ahead, will actually put us into an undesirable position where we have to deal with the issues of living in a safe operating space or leaving that. And in some of the scientific community actually feel that humankind already is no longer in a safe operating space. Now, this all sounds pretty abstract, but it's no longer an abstract issue. Everybody here probably has either experienced yourself or have seen it in the press, TV, etc., that we are experiencing more extremes in more places, different types, and higher amplitudes. And I will show a few in a moment. So in general, humankind always had to deal with problems, with issues created by themselves. And we are pretty ingenious, and we have solved a lot of the problems through the decades and centuries. What makes this time so critical and different from what we have done in the past is the short time scale we have left for ourselves. We know about the problem since a long time. And you could say, well, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, where this big acceleration actually started, people didn't know. They thought everything is limitless. The earth is limitless. The resources are limitless. But since at least half a century, since the Club of Rome came out with its report, since Earth Day was created, since Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, we cannot say we have an excuse not to have paid more attention. So in essence, we were asleep for about half a century, and now our time has compressed. I often say we are actually in negative time. We are falling behind the problem set. So how does that look? As we are talking about climate, we actually have to talk about energy, because a lot of the problem that we have with climate is caused by our use of energy. We have an increasing number of people using more energy, still of the wrong source, meaning fossil fuels. And if you're looking at that left-hand picture here, you can see the gray, blue, and purple are the coal, oil, and gas fractions of the energy use. And here and on the top, you can see the renewables coming in, and there are a few other nuclear, etc., in there, but it still shows you that we have an overwhelming, we are relying in an overwhelming fashion on fossil fuels. And then you go to the right side, and you see, as a function of time, this is the year 1000, here is 2000 plus, and you see that this energy use increased exponentially, so we burn more carbon. That led to an increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which is that brown curve. And you would have to defy the fundamental laws of physics and chemistry if the atmosphere would not warm if you do that. So when people often ask, well, are you sure that there is this effect? And I say, just look at the measurement of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and there is absolutely no way that we are not warming the atmosphere. So that is something, and just to give those of you who have a little bit of sense of what how energy is measured, we are using between 17 and 20 terawatts. That's, for many of you, an abstract number, but it's the equivalent of about 15 to 16,000 nuclear power plants. So we are really energy hungry, and we are not yet dialing back on that. And of course, if you do that, then you see the effects. And what you see in the left-hand side of this graph is the temperature anomaly, meaning the warming in essence, for 2023 for the period of January to December. And the warming above the 1880 to 1900 period, that was the reference level here, was about 1.41. There are different numbers. They are not that different, but they are if you are really looking at the, most significant digit. Copernicus, the European organization, came up with 1.48. If you use data from NASA and use the same reference level, you get 1.41. Doesn't matter. These are little changes. What really matters is that the previous record was closer to 1 degree Celsius. So we really made a big jump. Now, we were looking at 2024, and 2023 was an El Nino year, so we thought maybe this is an anomaly there. 2024 actually turned out to have superseded 2023 in terms of the summer temperature, so it was the hottest summer. There are projections from some of the climate scientists that 2024 could become as hot or hotter as 2023 once we have the full record at the end of December. And of course, you also see in this lower right picture, temperature since the 1880s, that would be here, is going up and down a little bit, but there is a general trend up. And if you're looking here at the last few years, 23 really made a jump. It's not just the air temperature averaged over the globe. We also saw something unusual, and that's the ocean temperatures really jumped heavily. And that has implications on a few phenomena that we experience. So how does that express itself? So again, you could say, well, that's fairly abstract. Looks, you know, we can look at that and we can take it in. Some people more immediate than others. But what is actually the effect of that warming? And just one quick remark on the magnitude of warming, because so we say about 1.5 degrees Celsius. And people say, well, why would I worry about that? Day-night amplitudes are 10 degrees Celsius, sometimes more. So why do I worry about that? That's confusing weather and climate. If you're looking at climate and long-term averages, the difference in globally averaged surface temperatures between an ice age and the present warm period was just 5 degrees Celsius. So 1.5 Celsius is actually almost 1/3 of a full amplitude between an ice age and a warm period. And you just have to look at how different the world looked during ice ages to show how much that matters. Our planet is extremely finely tuned. Small changes in certain parameters, including temperature, have a tremendous effect on how we can live on that planet. And of course, we are seeing some of these effects of these small temperature increases. For example, wildfires, you see quite a few of them, Brazil, Texas, Australia. So they are occurring not just in small areas, small regions as little hotspots. They are pretty widespread now. It's not just wildfires, it's also the, so some areas are too dry and you see the wildfires. Others are actually experiencing increasing flooding. So what we see in general is that dry areas are getting drier and wet areas are getting wetter. So the globe has that kind of pattern that we are recognizing. But this picture, what I wanted to show with that is that this is not an abstract issue anymore. Climate change has a human face. And when I saw that picture here on the right, that is from Greece, looking at the face of that woman, it tells you the whole story, pure desperation. Behind her is going up in flames, everything she had. And we will see more people being confronted with these kind of scenarios. And we have to really think about that. If we are not changing our course by 2050, 2075, 2 billion plus people will be affected by extreme heat. So this is something that actually has also a large scale. Well, just recently, we saw another phenomenon where Hurricane Helene actually wiped out Asheville, a city in the Blue Mountain Range in North Carolina that has roughly 500,000 people. And what that brought home is the message that the behavior of hurricanes, of cyclones is changing. We typically were worried primarily about wind damage. We are increasingly worried about the damage from flooding. The ocean surface is warmer, the cyclones take up more water, they hit a topographic barrier, cool off, and dump tremendous amounts of water into these areas. In the case of Asheville, within 1 day, the precipitation was similar to 2/3 of the annual precipitation of New York. So these are the kind of extremes that we have to take in, and we have to understand that in terms of what people on the ground experience rather than simply having a scientific abstract statement. We also have, so this too much water, some in the Southwest where I'm living now, we have too little. We are in a mega drought since about a quarter of a century. The last 2 decades were the driest in the last 1,200 years. Now that brings other problems with it. So if we are looking at the impact of climate change, it expresses itself in multiple forms, but it all actually hits people. Talking about Phoenix, Phoenix is the hottest city in the US. It has roughly 500 to 600 deaths per year attributed to heat. The real number is probably higher. And then you have to say, why, is that happening? A part of it we saw is the globe heating up, but part of it is actually all the infrastructure we are putting up. That's what you have heard typically, or probably most of you have heard the expression urban heat islands. And you just look at all the concrete and the asphalt, and you're not surprised that if we're looking at a temperature record for Phoenix from about 1900 to about now, it's roughly a 5 Fahrenheit warming. About half of that is coming from the global warming. Half of it, in round numbers, is coming from the infrastructure we are putting in place. So we have to watch on different fronts how climate change develops and what we can do about it. One thing that we have to make sure now is that we are not going from being deniers to fatalists. So we have to really think about what can we do. And in that context, we have to say, how much time do we have? And we don't really have that much time left. If we are looking at what was the Paris Agreement almost 10 years ago, 9 years ago, there was a clear pathway laid out and certain actions to stay at around 1.5, definitely below 2 degrees Celsius warming. We did not follow that pathway. We are not cutting emissions fast enough, and we are not taking CO2 out of the atmosphere fast enough. So we will miss the 1.5 degrees Celsius goal. The question is, how much warmer will we actually make the world? And what we are forgetting often is that if we would follow, and this is the pathway laid out for 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. You see here where we are. This is business as usual going up. We should stay within that blue envelope here. In order to do that, we have to cut emissions by 2030 by about 1/2. We are way off track. We also should take CO2 out of the atmosphere faster than we do. But with all these challenges is opportunity. There are several trillion-dollar industries waiting to be built. Energy transformation, hydrogen, transportation, food system, all of that, if we are making the choice to change, we have these opportunities. Humans are creatures of habit. We typically change. If we have to make different choices, we are experiencing sacrifice. I would say if we are not making different choices, we will face a much higher sacrifice. The cost of inaction is much higher than the cost of action now. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. So what do we have to do? Yeah, we have to get out of fossils. We have to accelerate renewables. We know what to do. Science is not the limiting factor. I'm sure Katharine will talk about that. It is us. How are we experiencing that? What narratives are we following? How are we reacting to that? And to sum that up, global climate change is progressing. We see that in front of our eyes. We're experiencing it more and more, physically almost. The gap between the impact of climate change and our willingness to go into the solution space is increasing rather than narrowing. Our opportunity is now. And when we say now, that's not 10, 20, 30 years from now. It means really tomorrow. And bottom line is, It's up to us as individuals, us as society, to make the right choices to get our planet back on track. We have quite a few options to follow a path that is more friendly to the life supporting systems than the one that we are doing right now. With that, I will close my remark. Thank you. I think you're muted, Khushboo.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Schlosser. Thank you so much for that informative presentation. Here we come where we talk about the integration of scientists who are involved in the science and the journalism, where our job is to get information from you and simplify it and bring it to the audience, the people. You're talking about making different choices, and I think that's where we have to collaborate with scientists and journalists in bringing out that information and the kind of misconceptions that people have about climate change. And that's why they're thinking about, you talked about fatalism. But I also want to talk to you about your work at the Global Futures Laboratory. Can you talk a little bit about your work at the laboratory and how, your perspective on climate change, on climate change challenges has changed with the work that you have done here?
So just to give people a sense of what a Global Futures Laboratory is, because often if you hear laboratory, you think there are two chemists in the back of a building mixing chemicals to find a new compound. That's definitely not what we are. We are in what the GFL or the Global Futures Laboratory is at the prototype of a new university for the future of the planet. So we are looking holistically at our world, try to understand why we got under so much pressure, but most importantly, how can we imagine futures of the world in which the next generations have options to shape life according to their desires? So within that, of course, is climate. It's one big problem among several others. What did we do on climate? We are actually stronger on climate solutions than projection of climate change. There are many institutions who are strong on that. Just one example, we hold some of the best technology for taking carbon back out of the atmosphere. So that is a passive method where we put instruments up that can absorb the CO2 in the atmosphere, take it out, and thereby, if it's done at scale, lead to the prevention of further warming, possibly even a cooling in a few decades once we have stabilized the increase. So we are also looking at what can you do with cities where you have a heat island effect, what materials to take, how many buildings can be up there. But then it goes, we are not just looking at the physical environment, we also look at all the people around us who are suffering from heat. And there is a social component in it that those who are already disadvantaged, they are the ones who bear the brunt of the effects. So we are looking at that. What can be done for these people? Is it cooling centers? Is it, helping them with their infrastructure in homes that are under air conditioned? How can you actually prevent that people who have access in principle to cooling centers are not going there because they are worried about political and legal consequences, because they might be illegal immigrants, they might have some other part of their record that could be checked if they are going in there. So we are looking at that. We are looking at how can we make areas more resilient? What does it mean to be more resilient? So these are the kind of things that we are focusing on, and we are working locally, but also globally. So we are working on all scales.
What do you think are some of the most, prominent innovations that we can use to mitigate the changes, the challenges of climate change? If you could talk about that a little bit.
So it depends on, I think there are several that have to come together. We have to look at the climate system itself. What can we do to prevent further heating of the planet? And that is, for example, negative emissions, but it's also emission cuts. So that has to come together. And in principle, we know how to do that. We are just slow in scaling up. On the other side, we really have to look at people and how can we help people to navigate increasing pressure from climate change in form of heat, but also in form of more droughts and more floods.
Mm-hmm.
And there, the environmental justice is coming in as a big component. And I will not talk too much about it because I know Katharine will talk about that. It is one of the biggest problems to say, how can we actually deal with climate injustice and make sure that we give people the kind of means that they need to not suffer from extreme heat and floods and droughts in an increasing, to an increasing extent.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Hayhoe, and we would like to go to you on this point. If you could talk about, you're an atmospheric scientist. If you could talk about how you are viewing this, this problem of climate change, and how your work has, kind of changed your perspective on how we can tackle and mitigate this.
So my perspective is very similar to Peter's, in that this is an existential issue for us. People often still today think of these issues as people or the planet, the environment or the economy. There is no profit on a dead planet. If nature disappears, we will too. So what's happened, and I love how Peter presents that historic perspective, what's happened is our society has developed under an assumption that sounds so ridiculous that when I say it, you won't even believe me. The assumption is that our planet is flat and infinite. That is the assumption that has governed the development of our economy. We always think, oh, there's more resources to get there, and there's somewhere to put our pollution, our waste, our garbage, our heat-trapping gas emissions that won't bother us. Well, of course, that's false. Everybody knows we live on a round planet, but our entire economy is still acting as if it were flat. And so as a result, we don't put a price on things that are essential to our life and our well-being, like the pollution. I'm just talking about the air pollution, the particulates that we breathe in from burning coal, gas, and oil. That's responsible for more deaths every year than people have died from COVID since the beginning of the pandemic. Yet we don't talk about that. And we don't incorporate that into the price we're paying for our energy. When we look at the trillions of dollars of climate risks that we see in the future that insurance companies are pricing out, when we look already at the billions of dollars that individual extreme weather events are being supersized by climate to create every day, Valencia, Spain, this week. 2 weeks ago, the hurricanes in the United States. Before that, the flooding and the typhoons in Southeast Asia and in Central Europe. We're seeing these disasters everywhere, and climate change, these disasters, and the pollution and the destruction of nature that go with them, they are not only environmental issues for environmentalists to care about and for you to write about on the environmental page of the newspaper or the media outlet. These are economic issues. They are health issues. They are infrastructure issues. They are even geopolitical issues. And they are certainly moral issues, ethical issues, and educational issues. We need to be having these conversations across the spectrum on every page, so to speak, of the newspaper, in every outlet that we have, because our future literally depends on this. It's not about saving the planet. It is about saving us and the nature on which all of our lives depend.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting because for the last 2 years we've been talking about Inflation Reduction Act. We're talking about the electric vehicle mandate. That's very interesting. But you talked about people living in this in this myth that we live on this infinite flat planet. But what are some of the effective communication strategies that you think that can be used? Because I'm a journalist, my job is to talk to experts and go out to the public who may hold some of these beliefs. So what do you think? How should we communicate with the public, and what are the best ways of telling people that what you're thinking is not exactly or totally wrong, but this is how we can improve it? That's where, like Dr. Schlosser talked about making different choices. How can we take that communication strategy forward from, just the scientists and the journalists and people who are interested in it to people who are not interested, people who are not willing to believe that there's something wrong?
Well, the first thing to do is to actually communicate about it. And that might sound obvious, but the data is clear that we are not doing that. So because I'm a scientist, I always look at data. I just want to share a little bit of data with you. It surprised me, and I think it might surprise you too. So let's see if I can share my screen. Here we go. Okay. So this is a map of public opinion around the world. The countries that are gray were not surveyed, but the countries that were surveyed represent 70% of the world's population. And these are maps from the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. So the first misconception we have is that people aren't worried. But this map shows very clearly most people are worried. I even live in the United States where 2/3 of people are worried, as Peter does too. So most people are worried. Why do we think they're not worried? Because of the next map. The next map asks people, not are you worried, but do you hear about it? Look at this map. People aren't hearing about it from their friends, their neighbors, their colleagues, at the place where they work or the place where they study, or even their media outlets. Now, just a note here, I don't have the evidence, but I suspect that you can see the evidence, the impact of one single person on this map. I don't think it's any accident that Sweden is the darkest color on this map, followed by Germany and Finland, because it shows the power that our voices have. Now, let me zoom in on the United States because I have these two maps and one more for the US. In the US, they asked people, is climate change happening? And they asked them, are you worried? And the numbers are about the same. And then they said, do you ever talk about it? And the answer is clearly, most people say no. 35% say they talk about it once in a while. And then for the US, they asked one extra question, and it's very relevant to us today. Do you hear about it in the media? Mm-hmm. So the first thing that we need to do is just talk about it, first of all. But then the second thing we need to do is we need to understand that we don't have most people not being worried that we need to make worried. Most people are already worried. What's holding them back? They don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. So a study across 65 countries found that headlines about bad news, doom and gloom headlines about the ocean circulation slowing down, or the ice sheets melting, or polar bears starving, or planetary boundaries being exceeded, these bad news headlines get the most clicks and the most shares. So often media organizations obviously want the most clicks and the most shares. The bad news gets the most clicks and the most shares, but the researchers found it is the worst at encouraging people to do anything. And what do we want? Do we want the whole world worried and paralyzed? Or do we want the whole world activated? I know I want the whole world activated. And so for people to be activated, they need to understand two things. Number one, why it matters. What I think of as the head to heart connection, why it matters to me here and now, not the Arctic and the polar bears in the future. So telling stories of here and now is very important. But then we also need the heart to be connected to the hands. People have to understand what solutions are already being implemented, what solutions could be implemented, and what could I do to make a difference? These are the stories we need to be telling, the heart and the hands.
Mm-hmm. How do you think, that goes to both of you, because you have both shared, data with us. And as a journalist, I find it very difficult to integrate, data that has big numbers or has, big figures into my stories, and I'm trying to simplify things for people here. If you could, share anything about how we can integrate these scientific findings into our daily work and make the communication smoother, so that it's not just people clicking on bad news, but also taking some action.
Peter, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can comment and hand over then. I think we have a situation where we're telling the stories in a way that people can relate to is important. Scientists are typically not trained to do that. So it needs a different connection between those who have that capacity, who are trained to report out with those who hold this sometimes abstract knowledge that has to be translated into stories in a much more extensive way. We have to, I mean, there are efforts to do that by having courses for scientists on communication. Well, that's not a bad thing. That should be done. But I think the connection to those who are in journalism schools, to those who are out in the profession, have a dialogue. Understand what does a journalist need to make a certain event or a certain topic relatable? Where are the issues that we sometimes don't see that are too abstract? And then have a conversation. How can we actually, put that into a language, into a story that a journalist feels comfortable telling, but also that we know will resonate? So I think that we need much more efforts on the communication side than we have done in the past. And we have to use new, well, the world of communication has changed dramatically, social media, etc. I mean, there is an exponential growth. Sometimes we really don't see anymore what they are doing. So part of it is to jointly understand what is actually happening if we are putting information on specific channels. And so that is something where I would hope that we are moving forward. And this is one example that we are working together with you to have this session, to understand each other. What can we give each other so that we can be better, and that jointly we really can find a way to penetrate deeper into, as Katharine said, the hearts and hands of people.
Mm-hmm. Katharine, I want to add a little bit to what Dr. Schlosser said. He said that we should have a message that we know will resonate with with a certain group. And I cannot help but mention the science moms that you're doing, the nonprofit. I mean, it's a group of moms, right? And the how it resonates with people is that you're a mom, I'm a mom, and we have kids, and we have to save the planet for our kids. It's not just us, it's our kids as well. And I think that resonates. And if you could just when you're answering that question, if you could also add a little bit about science moms and how it resonates with the larger audience of so many moms around the world.
Oh, of course. I love that. So when we're speaking about all of this information, as we've already talked about, it's important to put the big numbers in terms people can understand, number one. So Peter did this very effectively, talking about, well, why does a 2-degree Fahrenheit or a 1.3 degrees Celsius increase in the average temperature of the planet matter? It matters because the planet's temperature is as stable as the human body. So if our human body were running a fever of 1.3 degrees C, we'd be feeling sick. We'd be calling the doctor. And the hotter our temperature gets, the worse we feel. So metaphors are very important. But stories are really important because neuroscientists show that when we tell stories, our brain waves align with each other. And we invoke empathy, and we can enter into understanding other people's perspectives by telling stories about real people. So rather than saying 10,000 people died in this disastrous flood, telling the story of Nadia and her children and their home and what happened to them, for example, is so much more powerful from a human perspective. And of course, you know that. But then when we're talking about effective messaging, that's a science. There is a whole field of social science on effective messaging. And I'm a physical climate scientist, so I don't see myself as an expert on the best framing and the best messaging. Instead, I listen to the experts. And so when I listen to the experts, like the experts at the Potential Energy Coalition that do framing and marketing research, they found that mothers across the political spectrum are particularly movable and able to be motivated to call for climate action. So that's why I got together with a number of my colleagues who are mothers to create Science Moms, because research said that if we start conversations by talking about our children, people listen. Then Potential Energy went on last year around the world, and they asked people, what reasons are you motivated to care about climate change and to advocate for climate action? Is it because of the potential for green jobs, or reducing pollution, or a healthier planet, or it's not fair that the justice issue, that the people who created this problem are not the ones bearing the brunt of the impacts? Do you think the fossil fuel industry should pay for what they've done? They gave people all these different reasons, and they expected people in different countries or different sectors to give different reasons. But what they found is around the whole world, the number one reason everybody identified is love, especially love for the next generation is the reason they fight. So when I talk about climate change now, as strange as this might feel for a scientist, I often talk about love. And I try to begin my conversation with something that the people I'm talking to already love. I'm not trying to make them love something they don't. Like imagine if, if I cared about climate change because I ski. Do I have to teach everyone in the world to ski before they care about climate change? Of course not. I need to figure out what they already care about. And for many people, it is being a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a godparent. But for many other people, it might be something else like sports or nature or the place where they live. And so starting that conversation from the heart rather than the head, and then making that connection to the hands, what we can do, it's so powerful because it shows people that who they already are is the perfect person to care.
That's so amazing. That resonates with me. So I can say that it can resonate with a lot of people. Dr. Schlosser, I would like to go to you. And we talked about communication, and we talked about in your presentation you talked about how the climate has the heat temperatures are rising. You talked about the Paris Climate Accord, but we have missed the target, like you said in your presentation. Could you help us understand what are some of the things that contributed to this missing of the target? What are some of the challenges that we're facing in our international efforts to reach that target that we have been trying for decades now?
I think it's part of it is belief systems, value systems, economic and political elements are coming into it. And we have not yet reached a point where individuals would actually be convinced enough that this is an existential problem so that they change their behavior of voting, for example. A very simple thing, when people ask me, what can you do? Sometimes I said, there are a lot of things you can do in your home, this and that, but don't forget the power of your vote, because you have the agency to put somebody in place who cares more than some of the ones who have made decisions that missed the nationally determined contributions. Because what the Paris Accord did compared to the Kyoto Protocol was it left it up to nations to determine how they want to contribute to solving the overall problem. And it's just too easy to say, yes, we want to do that, but wait a second, if I'm doing that, the economy will suffer. If the economy will suffer, people will suffer. So there are sometimes completely wrong, cause and effect scenarios built up and propagated, and they often resonate. If you have in political debates somebody saying, if we invest in climate change, the economy will falter. That sends a shockwave through a lot of people. If somebody says, if we invest into climate change solutions, there are so many opportunities that will actually create a new economy, one that's much more friendly to the life supporting systems, but that will also help you to have still jobs in the future. If we invest now, we will actually build a future where you can still thrive. If we don't invest now, the costs of dealing with it in the future might be out of reach. It might actually lead to what Katharine already brought up, that the planet becomes increasingly inhabitable. Our species does not understand. We are one of about 10 million species. We have managed to influence the balance on the planet in a way that we are taking the capacity of the life supporting system to provide a service for us to the brink. We have to really see that, and we have to make sure that we are not pushing. Sometimes I say, we are like, it's like driving a car on red, not knowing how big the reserve tank is. if you feel that you take, the first instinct is take the foot off the gas pedal and think about where is the gas station. We are driving Earth like a car on red. We are in the buffer zone. We don't know how big the buffer is. We are just hoping that's big enough that we can get out of it. The problem is we are not taking the foot off the gas pedal. We are still in a big acceleration. And we don't know really what the gas station is. I mean, we have some ideas what could be done, but you know, we still have to put effort into that. So there is that disconnect of understanding that we are part of the life supporting of nature, that we are out of balance with the life supporting systems, and we are not willing to act. And there are many facets, as I said, economy, politics, etc.
You know, if I could just add something to what Peter said. For a long time, people still thought that the costs of doing something now were higher than the costs of just waiting until later because of the way economic models de-incentivize present-day action. But a study that just came out of the Potsdam Institute this spring found that the costs of doing something now versus the cost of dealing with the consequences later are at least 6 times less. So even from an economic perspective, it makes sense. So if it makes sense economically, if it makes sense logically, we live on a round planet, why aren't we doing more? There's 2 basic issues we have. Number one is individually, people don't know what they can do. Individually, people do not understand that their voice is the most powerful force they have to fight for change. But then second, and this is what Peter alluded to, I just want to emphasize again, economically, our entire system is stacked against us. Fossil fuels are subsidized out of taxpayer pockets, keeping dirty, polluting sources of energy artificially cheaper than clean new sources of energy. We are de-incentivized to build efficient infrastructure, de-incentivized to have healthy food systems as opposed to unhealthy, polluting factory farms. Our entire system is built to incentivize the wrong decisions. And so this is why individual action is never going to be enough. We have to change the system so the easiest and most affordable choice for everyone, for your neighbor, for your grandmother, for everybody, the easiest and most effective choice and most affordable choice is the best choice. And for that, we have to change the system. And to change the system, it is not what we eat, what we drive, or the type of light bulb we have in our lamp that will change the system. It is the force of our and the power of our voices. But when I say our voices, I don't mean scientists. I mean everyone. Because social science has shown that scientists are trusted messengers, healthcare professionals are trusted messengers, other types of leaders, and obviously journalists who have a big platform are trusted messengers, but the most trusted messenger, the person that will listen to the most, is somebody we know. Our family and our friends are the most trusted messengers. And so we all have a voice. And I think young people have shown us the power of how to use those voices. That is the force that can give us the societal change we need.
Very hopeful message there. You talked about systems. Dr. Schlosser, I want to ask you about, how are different countries dealing with it? Like Dr. Hayhoe also gave us a picture of how, how these countries are, this conversation is coming up about climate change. How are different countries dealing with this? And is there any model that you think that we can learn from, some model that has done better than the others?
You saw from the map that Katharine showed that there are some areas in Scandinavia, Europe, that took the issue more seriously and are actually acting more decisively. It's not without difficulties, but they actually are moving faster. If I fly into Frankfurt or anywhere in Europe, I see, although it's compared to, let's say, the southwest of the US, it's not really blessed with the kind of sunshine that you need for solar energy. But you see a lot of panels, solar panels on roofs of homes. You see increasingly some solar farms being built there. You see windmills. Where I grew up on the River Rhine, I'm amazed when I go back there how many windmills I find. So I think people, you also see it in other areas like recycling and things like that. If a factory is being removed, they have to restore the environment. They have to look at the soil. Was it contaminated? If yes, they have to restore it. So I think there is a different political will to impose some regulation, and it does not tip people over to say, well, we don't want that. We are voting for a different political regime. I think the entire readiness, willingness is further developed there. If you're looking at other countries, some of them actually are driving some of the change because of economical reasons. If you look at the solar industry, I mean, China, India, they see that as a big issue. Electric vehicles, and we can discuss what the negative effects of electric vehicles are. Overall, I think they are a transition towards hydrogen-powered vehicles. And they are necessary. So you also can see how certain countries are positioning themselves just for that reason. So they might not be driven primarily by an environmental concern, but they are actually contributing by using some of the opportunities that I try to point out, all the industries that can be built to change systems to a more environmentally friendly mode of operation. So I think part of it is culture, part of it is value systems, part of it is how closely you live to each other, part of it is how the geography in which you live shows you more immediately where the damage can come in. But in my view, the fundamental issue is value systems. We try to understand them. We try to understand how long they persist. We try to understand what are the incentives that we can offer people to change their value system, which then translates into behavior, which translates into how we are dealing with our planet.
I think that's where the moms come in with the value system. And I think they're the foundation of our value system. And if we get more moms to, think about climate change, I think the next generation will automatically have different behaviors and responses to the challenges that we're facing. On that, Dr. Hayhoe, I would like to go to you. And I want to, take up an issue that is very close to my heart as well, my profession as well, and that is misinformation. The misinformation that we deal with on daily basis about a lot of issues, but also climate change. And this is something that people generally don't really think about when they're talking about some issue that they believe is not true. But climate change is something that not many people may take very, very seriously at this point. How do you think we can deal with that problem of misinformation? And where do you think, the scientist community and the journalist fraternity can come together, especially foreign correspondents? How do you think that we can work together on this problem of misinformation together?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so glad you asked about that, because I think that's an issue that's at the top of everyone's mind in general. We know, unfortunately, that humans have a tendency to spread and distribute misinformation faster than truth. So it's a saying that's attributed to the American author Mark Twain. I don't think he actually wrote it, but it's from it's from the 1800s, before we had internet or social media. And the saying is that a lie can circle the world while the truth is still getting its boots on. So if you use that to today, a lie could circle the world 1,000,000 times while the truth is still getting its boots on, thanks to social media. In fact, a few years ago, researchers at MIT did a study where they found that false information that was shared on Twitter got shared 6 times faster than accurate information. But there's a lot of research right now going on misinformation, and that research shows that education can play a key difference. That when people are educated on critical thinking, check your sources, who said that, what their biases could be, they are much better at detecting misinformation online, as well as even misinformation from AI. Because we all know that, unfortunately, AI just generates misinformation by hallucination too. So education and good reporting is even more important now, and research shows it works. It works to help people learn how to think critically. And for people like Peter and I at universities, this is a huge part of what we think of when we're training students in our programs. So that's the general landscape. And now let's talk about climate change. We have known since the 1850s that digging up and burning coal and gas and oil produces heat-trapping carbon pollution that is wrapping an extra blanket around the planet, causing it to warm. By the 1890s, scientists were able to calculate how fast the Earth would warm, depending on how much carbon we produced. By the 1930s, scientists had detected the warming of the planet. By the 1960s, scientists were so worried they were warning governments and leaders about the risks of climate change in the 1960s. When did climate disinformation begin? And I'm saying disinformation because that means there's a deliberate component to it. When did it begin? It began in the late 1980s and early 1990s, well over 100 years after the science. Why did it begin? Because the whole goal is to prevent action. And in the 1980s and 90s, that was when climate change moved from a future issue that we don't have to do anything about yet to a present issue. That is when climate change became a present issue. The IPCC was formed, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was signed, a record hot summer occurred in 1988. Climate scientist Jim Hansen testified to the US Congress saying global warming is real. All of that began to happen around 1990, and that's when denial began. So the purpose of denial is not to question the science, because the same people who say, are you sure that that's real? They use stoves and refrigerators and airplanes, and it's the same physics. They don't actually have a problem with the science. They have a problem with the solutions. But it doesn't sound very good to say, oh, it's a real problem and it's affecting people around the world and it would be cheaper to just fix it, but I don't want to do it. That doesn't sound very good. So instead they make up disinformation about how it's not us or it's not bad, or the biggest part of disinformation today is the solutions are worse than the problem. Electric cars are worse than regular cars. Wind energy is worse than coal. And so these types of solutions can even deceive people, or these types of disinformation can even deceive people who care about climate change. So today, more than ever, it's very important to be really accurate and to be really clear about the fact that climate is changing. Humans are responsible, the impacts are serious, but there are real solutions, not perfect solutions. When have humans ever been perfect? We don't have perfect solutions, but we have solutions that are much better than the solutions that are, than the energy sources that are killing more people every year than have died from the pandemic since the beginning of COVID. There's a lot that we can do. And now more than ever, I think good journalism is essential.
We talked about, you said that it's now more than ever, we need to do something, and journalism is important. The science is, the science fraternity is important. I have a question from our audience, which says that, the politicians, it's a US election in like a few days, and over the past few months, we have not heard either of the candidate being talking about climate as something that's really important to all of us. We talked about it's an existential crisis and we have to act now and not in the future. Why do you think politicians are so, avoidant when it comes to climate change?
Well, part of the problem is, and I'd love to hear Peter's ideas on this too, as humans, we still think of climate change as a separate bucket. So here we have the economy and jobs and education and health, politicians think. And then we personally, we think, well, here's my living expenses and my job and my children. And we think there's all these buckets. And then we have climate at the end and we think, well, I just don't have a lot of time or bandwidth or money or effort to put into that bucket. Climate change is not a separate bucket. Climate change is the whole in every other bucket. Climate change affects your insurance rates, the quality of the air you breathe, your health, the price of groceries at the grocery store, national security, jobs, the economy. Climate change is the hole in every bucket. And if we don't patch that hole, we can't fill any other bucket. So part of the reason why we don't hear politicians talk about this enough is because they still think it's an extra bucket. whereas in fact, it's the bucket, it's the hole in every bucket. And that's why I said, we don't want to just hear about this on the environment page of your outlet. We want to hear about this on the business page, the fashion page, the life page, the news page, every page, until we patch that bucket and climate scientists can go back to studying the distant past instead of the future. Work us out of a job. That is what we need to do. So that's part of the reason, but also in the US, climate change is the most politically polarized issue and has been for 15 years. And so in an election, when they're trying to win an election, they want to focus on what's going to make people vote for them as opposed to someone else. Now, personally, I think that talking more about climate would make people vote more for one person than the other. But I'm sure it's a strategic decision they've made, because a thermometer doesn't give you a different answer depending on how you vote. But a lot of people, unfortunately, today still believe it does. Peter, what would you add to that?
Not that much to add. The one thing that I would add is that it's still hard for people to see that there is a hole in all the buckets that is climate. And that brings it back to, how does science and journalism have to work together to get to a better outcome? Because it is also part of journalism to bring that into the discussion. If you look at some of the debates, it could actually be teased out of them, if they are not going there voluntarily, by asking the question, what are you thinking about climate change? What about the effects on everything, including economy and everything that Katharine listed? How are you looking at that? What is your position on that? What will you do? Now, there are here and there are these glimmers of hope. So, for example, in the Chips and Science Act, there were resources to, seed some activities or accelerate some of them. But in the overall picture, that is still not enough. So building upon that and pointing them out, raising them if they are not raised, if they are not coming up in the agenda of those who are up for election. That is, I think, our responsibility, to make sure that we know about the overall impact of climate change, which in essence penetrates all venues of our life. Make sure that it's not forgotten, that it is part of the questions asked in the debate. I didn't hear anybody ask that. None of the journalists, none of the reporters, none of the TV hosts, none of the moderators of the debates brought it out. So we have not yet reached a point where this is something, if the politician is not raising it, we hold them to it. That would be my addition to what Katharine so eloquently said.
I think that's a great point to end on. It's been such a holistic, discussion, and I think I will definitely reach out to both of you if I'm doing a story on climate change. That's definitely going to be there, and I feel so informed. And I think that our audience who's joined us for this very great, very informative and enlightening discussion has also, gotten some thoughts and ideas about how they can make a difference and how they can incorporate all these ideas and scientific research into their reporting and fighting disinformation and climate change in this very pivotal moment in our human history. So thank you so much, Dr. Hayhoe, Dr. Schlosser. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your expertise. I really enjoyed this conversation. I wasn't expecting to enjoy it that much, but I really enjoyed it, and thank you so much.
Glad you enjoyed it, and we are banking on you to move forward with all the information that you gathered here.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you to our audience. Thank you so much.